One of the reasons that I chose to become an entrepreneur was partially because of the fact that I knew I just could not work for somebody else. I knew that the way that the bosses that I had thought, the way they conducted themselves, the way they managed their staff, the way that they did business was a very different way than what I would have done. And so I realized that the only way to do that was to work for myself. And what happened was I was working for the military, and it was very unsuitable for me. It was the challenge was going. I did a lot of office stuff. I also did a fair amount of outdoor stuff. But I was finding myself with a crushed spirit. I was getting sick. I was becoming angry. I was bored. There were so many things that were going on around me that I felt I was being destroyed. And normally I pay close attention to things like that, and I act on them. I make sure that I take myself away from situations like that, but I felt I had no choice. And I remember one particularly hard week that I'd had, and I spent most of the time at the doctor. I was really very ill. I was ending up with a lot of stomach problems. And I went home, and it was kind of midweek, and I had been recalling a conversation that I had with the major that was working there. He was a lovely man. He was absolutely wonderful and still is a good friend to me. But he brought me into his office that day, and he sat me down and he said, "Why are you still here? You have outgrown every single challenge that this job can possibly offer you. Why are you here?" And I said, "I don't know. I really don't know." And he said, "I think it's time for you to think about moving on somewhere else. You've got much more talent than what this job can bring out in you." And in some ways, it kind of upset me. I almost felt like, oh, I'm just being turfed here, even though I knew that wasn't the truth. He was speaking his truth to me, and on some level, I was hearing it. But I went home, and that night when I slept, I had a dream of my grandmother. I dreamed I was in this house, and it was dark. It was very dark and dusty, and there were boxes piled up everywhere. They were all over the place, and they were covered with thick dust, and there were cobwebs hanging everywhere. There were no doors or windows to get in or out anywhere. And suddenly a window appeared, and my deceased grandmother was there and tapping at the window, beckoning me to come. And I went over there, and I couldn't open the window. I just physically could not do it. And she opened it for me, and I remember stepping out and breathing the most luscious air I'd ever breathed in my life. The scenery was beautiful. And she said, "Walk with me for a little while." And so I walked with her. And we had a long conversation. It was one of the longest dreams I remember having. But we had a very long conversation about, why was I in that house? Why was I in there? It was a terrible place for me. And she told me that being in that house, if I stayed there, the house would kill me. I would die. And she said that this was a very strong warning. She told me I had to really believe it. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. And the next thing I knew, I was in Jasper National Park, where I was born and raised. And she took me over to Old Fort Point, where there was this cache with plaques on it and the names of the explorers that had been there. And she stood me in front of it, and she said, "You have to continue on from where your ancestors were. You have to continue on." And then we walked back a ways, and I had to sit on a bench, and she told me that I couldn't follow her. And she left, and I woke up. And that morning, I phoned my boss and I said, I'm finished. I'm not coming back.